Welcome to the Rhythm Tree tutorial series, created by the junior high band teachers of the Gilbert Unified School District in Gilbert, Arizona. Rhythm Tree tutorial number 2, quarter and eighth. At the end of this tutorial, you should understand quarter notes and quarter rests, eighth notes and eighth rests, the relationships and differences among these notes and rests, and the mathematical breakdown of the note and rest values from whole to eighth. To be successful, you need to already understand the concepts taught in these earlier tutorials. Rhythm Tree Part 1, Whole and Half. The first tutorial in this series showed that notes make sound and rests are silent. It also showed that notes and rests of the same type get the same number of beats. The analogy of a rhythm tree helped explain the relationships between different note and rest values by picturing them as leaves on a tree. Starting from the whole, worth 4, the tree branched out into 2 half leaves of shorter value, worth 2 each. This tutorial continues the rhythm tree analogy to show the relationships between the next 2 types of smaller notes and rests, quarters and eighths. We already know that the whole grew into 2 halves. Now, each half branch sprouts 2 smaller leaves of equal size. Each new leaf is 1/4 of the whole. Another word for 1/4 is quarter. So we call it a quarter note when it makes sound and a quarter rest when it is silent. This is what quarter notes look like. Quarter notes get 1 beat each of sound. This is what quarter rests look like. Quarter rests get 1 beat each of silence. Quarter notes and quarter rests get 1 beat each. Let's take a look at halves versus quarters. Notice the differences in these notes and rests. We'll start with the notes. Half notes have hollow note heads. They're not filled in. Quarter notes have solid note heads. They are filled in. Half notes get 2 beats each of sound. Quarter notes get 1 beat each of sound. When counting half notes, we count 2 numbers for each note. 1, 2, 3, 4. When counting quarter notes, we count 1 number for each note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's take a look at the rests. Half rests sit on the 3rd line. Quarter rests look like squiggles. Half rests get 2 beats each of silence. Quarter rests get 1 beat each of silence. When counting half rests, we count 2 numbers for each rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. When counting quarter rests, we count 1 number for each rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each quarter branch produces 2 smaller leaves of equal size. Each new leaf is 1/8 of the whole, so we call it an eighth note when it makes sound and an eighth rest when it is silent. This is what 8 single eighth notes look like. Notice that they have flags on the stems. Because a number represents the beat, and eighths only get 1/2 a beat each, we need a new symbol for the eighths that occur between the numbers. Here are where the numbers fall for the beats, 1, 2, 3, and 4. For the new symbol that occurs between the numbers, we write a plus sign, but we say "and" when counting it out loud. This is where the plus signs go after each number. We would count it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is what 8 single-eighth rests look like. The counting is exactly the same as if it were notes. We still use the same numbers and the plus sign and say "and" when we count. The only difference is that eighth rests are silent and eighth notes make sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Eighth notes and eighth rests get 1/2 a beat each. Sometimes eighth notes are grouped together with a beam. Nothing changes except the look. Rests never get beams. Here we have 2 single-eighth notes side by side. You could even think of it as 2 people standing in a room, each of them holding their own little flag. Then we have 2 eighth notes connected together with a beam called beamed eighth notes. Think of the same 2 people that were holding flags if they put the flags down and they picked up a beam of wood and held it between them. The people haven't changed, they're the same. So these eighth notes are exactly the same, whether they're single or beamed together. There are 2 common ways that we beam eighth notes together. A beam grouping 2 eighth notes together, or a beam connecting 4 eighth notes together. In a measure, we can mix and match single eighth notes or beamed eighth notes. Remember, they're the same, they're just connected together differently. We would start with 1 and for our 2 single eighth notes. Then our 2 beamed eighth notes have the same counting starting on the next beat, 2 and. Finally, our 4 beamed together eighth notes would be 3 and 4 and. But no matter how we connect them together, they're all the same as if they were single eighth notes. So now let's compare quarter notes and eighth notes. Notice the differences in these notes. For quarter notes, there are no flags on the stems. For eighth notes, there are single flags on the stems of the single eighth notes. Quarter notes cannot be beamed. Eighth notes can be beamed, most commonly in groups of 2 or groups of 4. Quarter notes get 1 beat each of sound. Eighth notes get 1/2 a beat each of sound. When counting quarter notes, we count 1 number for every note. 1, 2, 3, 4. When counting eighth notes, we count and write a plus sign in between the numbers. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now let's look at the rests, comparing quarter rests to eighth rests. Notice the differences. Quarter rests look like squiggles. Eighth rests look like fancy 7s with a dot on the left. Quarter rests get 1 beat each of silence. Eighth rests get only 1/2 a beat each of silence. When counting quarter rests, we count 1 number for every rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. When counting eighth rests, we count and write a plus sign in between the numbers, just like we did for the eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Notice the math. We'll start with the whole. It's worth 4 beats because it's the whole amount. It's our biggest leaf on the tree. So a whole note gets 4 beats of sound, and a whole rest gets 4 beats of silence. Then we divide our whole into halves. Halves get 2 beats each because it's half of the whole. So a half note gets 2 beats of sound, and a half rest gets 2 beats of silence. Then we'll divide our whole into quarters. Quarter gets 1 beat because it's 1/4 of the whole. So a quarter note gets 1 beat of sound, and a quarter rest gets 1 beat of silence. Then we'll take our whole and divide it into eighths. An eighth gets 1/2 of a beat. That's 0.5 of a single beat, because it's 1/8 of the whole. So an eighth note gets 1/2 a beat of sound, and an eighth rest gets 1/2 of a beat of silence. This tutorial showed that notes and rests of the same type get the same number of beats, and that notes make sound and rests are silent. It employed the analogy of a rhythm tree to show the relationships between note and rest values of the half, quarter, and eighth types. The next tutorial in this series will focus on smaller note and rest values, sixteenths.